Hi, everybody. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. This is the Plant-Based Business Hour. It's wonderful to be with you again. I am indeed back on the road. This time it's Future Food Tech in New York. It's actually, as I dub it, Alternative Proteins Week in New York. There's so much going on here. The Future Food Tech 2-day conference starting today, but also I'm throwing a big party at the New York Stock Exchange on Thursday. So very exciting times, but let's get right to it. There are so many companies featured, speaking, doing taste tests here at Future Food Tech. I want to highlight, which to me is one of the most exciting companies. I have with me folks from Gingko Bioworks. I'll first introduce the host. I hope I get everyone's name right. Sushmita Venkatraman, Director of Marketing and Growth at Gingko Bioworks, and Swami Srinivas, oh my word, I knew it'd be something. Srinivas, who's the Director of Organism Engineering. So much to discuss here. I'll open it up to the two of you, and whichever of you would like to take this question can. But first of all, explain to the world, what exactly does Gingko Bioworks do?
I can take that question. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here in New York, and nice to sort of have this 15 to 20-minute session with you to just talk about what Gingko Bioworks does. So we are specialists in cell programming. We are pioneers in synthetic biology, and we're based in Boston. We were founded in, I believe, 2008 by a group in MIT. And our founder, Tom Knight, really had an epiphany back in the 2000s when everyone's really excited about the Human Genome Project. Tom Knight basically had this epiphany that one of the most interesting things to do in the 21st century is to program biology. And so we've really built at Gingko Bioworks the tools, the platform, and the knowledge to help companies program biology so that they can discover, they can optimize biology, and they can produce, and Swami's going to get into it, organisms that can help produce products. And we are a technology enabler in the true sense. So we have this platform, hundreds and thousands of square foot of space in Dry Dock in Boston. We have our foundries there. We have, which is basically combines our hardware, our software, as well as a lot of automation. And then we also have our software called as Codebase, and that gives us knowledge to run many experiments, very difficult experiments. And our foundry allows us to run repeatable experiments at a scale that is probably not really imaginable until you actually come into Gingko Bioworks. So that's sort of who we are in a nutshell, specialists in cell programming.
Yeah, so fascinating. So our next interview will be live from Gingko Bioworks, actually, because wouldn't that be cool? I'm joking. I don't know if they'll let us in, but wouldn't that be cool to see the scale that we're talking about? So when I think of a scientist, I think of someone in a white coat and working on, one petri dish, but you're talking about the scale that can change the world. I don't say that lightly because I think Jensen Yang, the CEO of NVIDIA, recently was on CNBC saying protein synthesis, which is one of the things that you do or work on. Synthetic biology is really going to be the future. But for those who really don't understand what synthetic biology is, Swami, maybe you could take us through really what you do there, maybe on a more organismic level, if that is said, and help people understand what you're working on.
Oh, absolutely. So we think of biology just like how people think of computers, right, and software. So just like there are zeros and ones in software, there are A, C, G, and T's in DNA. And so if you can read DNA, and that's DNA sequencing, and if you can write DNA, that's DNA printing. And then if you have a compiler, that's your cell. Now you have, just like software, you have a programmable piece of information that can give you a tangible output.
Okay. And is that tangible output only food? No, it can be more than food.
It can literally be anything. Excuse me. So it can, biology can make anything from a commodity chemical, an industrial chemical, all the way down to a product where the cell itself is what you consume. So really, there are very few limitations on what biology can do. It touches almost every aspect of our lives.
Okay, so I feel compelled to ask this just for those out there. Is this different than what's wrong with me? when people are afraid in food that their food has been genetically altered. So is it the same thing as genetically altering organisms, as you say, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, I think you're looking for GMOs.
Thank you. What's wrong
Yeah,
with me?
yes.
Genetically modified. I haven't had much coffee. It's really the
No,
morning
at Ginkgo we love GMOs, right?
Mhm.
And GMOs are, in my opinion, often taken out of context. In the right applications, GMOs can be significantly enabling. You can imagine a really rare protein found in a plant that has an amazing functional property that you could otherwise never grow and obtain at a scale that's necessary, that can be enabled through synthetic biology now. So I can think of a lot of applications where this is probably the only way to get things that we want.
I want to stress that I don't know that our world would be able to feed this growing population going from 7.7 billion to 9.8 billion, according to the United Nations, by 2050, without genetically modified foods. I see genetically modified foods personally as a blank slate. It could be nefarious if it were in the wrong hands, but it is not by definition nefarious. It's a bit of an unfortunate marketing scenario. The world has this misunderstanding, perhaps even, of genetically modified foods, GMO. Thank you very much for that reminder. But it's not just foods. We're talking about lots of things, but genetically modified is being scary. Would you say that there is no reason to be afraid?
I don't think there's any reason to be afraid. As our technologies and especially our genetic engineering technologies have evolved, we've become extremely precise. We at Ginkgo we have one of the best sequencing capabilities in the world. So almost every organism is completely sequenced. The whole genome is sequenced. We have a lot of information about every organism that we work with, and so we can make really good decisions.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
please.
I want to add to that. The way to kind of think about it is that so the first application. So here right now we are in the alternate proteins world, and so we're going to be talking a lot the next 2 days about how can Ginkgo help companies in who are specializing in alternate proteins. But stepping back from just food, if you actually look at the potential for biology, you're going all the way from like biomaterials to agricultural biologics to wastewater remediation to like energy, carbon capture, carbon synthesis. So there's just a lot that we can do with biology, and we think we're just scratching the surface of what can be done. And back to your earlier question on like what is Ginkgo Bioworks? Our message really to the people who are spending all their time programming these cells as well as building these killer biological applications is that you don't have to do it on your own, you don't have to do it alone, and you don't have to it's already a very tough market there, it's very competitive. You just really focus on your product and your brand. Don't worry about like back integrating R&D, building all that capabilities and the structures. Everything exists. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and then we can actually help you get there. And that is the message, at least for the next 2 days, to many companies over here, is that we've built this, and so just come and join us.
When you say everything exists, do you mean everything exists in nature already? It is there to be captured and utilized for benefit? Or do you mean that everything exists at Ginkgo Bioworks already?
I mean like the facilities, the R&D
I see,
facilities, the
yes.
knowledge, the code base, and brilliant scientists like Swami who are like amazing PhDs in like different sciences, and we have about like 400 plus experts in different fields. And so people are like waiting to work with entrepreneurs as well as large companies in the space.
So I think there's another quote, and I cannot remember who said this, of Ginkgo Bioworks. That's an amazing company because at some point everything's going to run through Ginkgo Bioworks because they're going to help to create things at scale, and almost every company's going to want to work with them. So maybe you can shine the light on, since all of the infrastructure is already there, who does want to work with you, or perhaps better asked, how do you decide who to work with? Do they find you? Do you find them? What's the process? Because ultimately you get your technology through brilliant scientists like Swami to other companies. You don't go direct to market yourselves, correct?
Yes.
So how do you find other companies, and how do they find you?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, I've seen them both happen. There are scenarios where we have to advocate for the use of synthetic biology in a new area, in which case we go and try to educate the public about a particular application area where we think synthetic biology can shine. And there are other areas where there's an established use of fermentation or organisms already. I mean, you can think about baking, right, as an example. And those are cases where they would come to us. And really what we would be delivering is that scale through the foundry, which is really the way I think about it is more shots on goal, right? And then code base, our knowledge base, allows us to direct our shots towards right towards the hoop, right? So that's how I think about it.
It really is fascinating. Again, I want to stress all the benefit that can come from this knowledge. Ultimately, you're harnessing the knowledge of nature and learning from nature and using that for our benefit. So you say that there are some companies out there that they would like this scale and they can see the vision. What are some applications that maybe people don't think of or doesn't immediately come to mind that you say, oh gosh, this would really be enhanced by synthetic biology?
I think there are quite a few examples of these. I mean, things like bioremediation, these are like, or climate change, these are larger challenges that cannot be addressed by any one company or one group of people, but rather requires a large concerted effort. I think, Sushmita, maybe you can talk a little bit about our climate change efforts. And
I'd love to know more about
Yeah, of
climate
course.
change.
For us, climate at Ginkgo, we take it very seriously. And one thing to add is last September, actually, we went public. And so we raised about 1.6 billion. And this money is actually used to continuously improve, the infrastructure, and also help build this ecosystem where biology can be used. And the reason why I emphasize on biology, so I studied biology undergrad, my graduate level, and the one thing I've really come to realize is that it really helps unlock the economies of scale, and it helps companies produce products that can really be differentiated from not only each other but also from what exists today. And there's a lot of creativity around R&D and biology that one can really geek out on and build new solutions. And some of the the benefits are biodegradability, performance. You can meet the performance of existing products. Well, hell, you can also enhance the performance of products using very specific techniques. And so I think it's really important for the world to sort of step back and realize that biology is a powerful ally in the fight against climate change. And that we need to move away from petrochemical processes. We need to move away from the traditional methods of farming, and we need to really leverage what we really have, which is reproducible, as well as degradable, safe for the planet.
And when you say reproducible and degradable, would this imply naturally that it captures more carbon or it just puts out less carbon? Explain for me again that connection between the environment and how this can really help to address climate change.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the processes that we are seeing right now emit a lot of greenhouse gases. And they involve harming animals in the process. They involve harming plants in the process. And so what fermentation can do, precision fermentation, as well as other techniques related to biology, is to really remove those harmful components associated with just breaking it down, the processes that are naturally used today. And so when I mean reproducible, experiments can also be reproducible, and that's how you can get to that level of the scale that we are really imagining.
Right. And then things like food supply are not dependent on particular microclimates, right? What we often see is there's an abundance of food in certain areas, and there is a complete lack of that in other areas. Fermentation is something that can be set up in this room. It's a facility that can run reproducibly every day, has very defined inputs, very defined outputs. And then when you start relying on technologies like this, you can take out that variable, excuse me, the variability from the equation.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about fermentation because, as we all know, there's kimchi and bread and beer and kombucha. We already use fermentation, which is an example of showing how we're already harnessing, if you will, nature at its best and in a way most simple, and taking it to our benefit from there. So again, want to stress for everyone, there's a poor... Sushmita, can you take on the marketing job of changing everyone's perception of GMO? I'll give you that huge marketing task for the world.
If you come by a booth, for everyone who's here, you come by a booth. We've got plenty of goodies to give away. We've got real cool stickers that I've noticed every event that we go to. It's a big I love GMO sticker. And then we've got our magazines, grow magazines, that really talk about the the intersection of biology, art, design, and now even like how can we think about like businesses around it. So it's very, stop by the booth. There's a lot of things to pick up from us, and talk to the Ginkgo team. We're all over today.
My last exit question for you as we go to our next guest to highlight another company that's here. I used to ask this question on the Plant-Based Business Hour: what are your predictions for the next 10 years? I now say, what are your predictions for the next 3 years? Because things are moving so fast. I'll start with you, Sushmita, and then end with you, Swami.
Yeah, absolutely. So my research has shown me that the market for bioengineered goods is very large. It's a $1 trillion economy out there with just bioengineered goods. I see a world where everything can be grown using biology. We'll be proud of it. We'll be proud to wear shoes, wear bags, eat food, everything, knowing that this is biomade. And I see a world where people are really proud of it. So that's something top of mind, but not only from wearables, but also the way that we are uh, different innovative ways that we're trying to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, use it, recyclability. All of this is key, and there are different solutions that we're thinking about. Again, spanning from food, materials, agriculture, and I would not do service if I didn't mention the world of pharmaceuticals. And if we had more time, we could really get into like even the mRNA, the vaccines that all of us have here walking around is a product of synthetic biology and cell programming. And so, maybe in a different interview, when the food focus is not just Gingko Bioworks and what we do at a high level, but we do a lot in the world of pharma to really make therapeutics better, and so that we can live a more healthier life and a more sustainable planet.
Yes, and I'll just add to that that's helping people who are in dire need, let's say skin grafting, or you've been burned and then you can graft skin through cells. You can help grow that skin back. There's so many beneficial things that can happen through biology. And think about what Sushmita said about not just altering our carbon footprint, but think about all the things we make that are not degradable, and they go into landfills. And that problem just there, if we could work from a degradable system, so impactful. Okay, you have the last word. What are your predictions for the next 3 years, Swami?
Well, we're in the alternate food protein conference right now, so I will say that I think our next big goal would be to change the kind of foods that we consume. And so I do think that this is going to be the next big 5-year milestone that we'll hit.
And what kind of foods will we consume?
I think that our foods won't come from the traditional plants and animals that we are used to consuming. They'll come from exotic sources. They'll have better functional properties. They'll have more. You'll need less to achieve more. And so I do think that that's where we're heading.
Will we still have the joy of eating if you eat less?
I think so. I think so.
And when you say exotic sources, what are you thinking?
I'd say the world is your oyster at this point. So, you can think literally anything that biology makes naturally right now.
Yeah. So that's the big takeaway for me is we have the world at our fingertips, this enormous resource that we call biology. Why would we be making things that aren't degradable and biosynthetic? That just would make no sense to me. I want to thank you both. We had a little bit of a start issue here and they were extremely patient with me. So I want to thank you both, Sushmita and Swami, for being with me here at Future Food Tech. We have a revolving door. So as you two leave, I'm going to bring on our next guest. We're all going to just musical chairs. You guys are going to switch out, but I will see you all day at the conference.
Thank you so much. This is amazing.
Thank you. And please, for people here, please do stop by. We would love to chat with you.
More on Gingko Bioworks. I'll come find you for longer interviews. There's so much to discuss. We basically have the world at our fingertips. So thank you, both of you. Have a wonderful and successful conference. I'm going to bring on Manuel and do a little bit of admin here as I change the name of my next guest so we can see our next guest right here. And have I changed it? Hold on, folks. Hold on. Okay. Let's see. Nope. Hey. Okay. Hold on, everybody. And there we go. I believe I've got it. Okay. Let's get in close. There were two before and now there were three before and now there's only two of us. And I've switched to the Plant-Based Business Hour Part 2. There's so many companies that I could interview here at Future Food Tech. Oh my gosh. Luckily, you are my last. I'm only doing 2, but of course, there's many more people to talk to today. We're going to switch gears from creating to investing in those that create. So I have the Director of Investment here from Footprint Coalition. Manuel, help me with your last name.
Waenke. It's a tough one.
Waenke. I was going to say Dutch. I wasn't sure what we were working with. I almost said Waenke, so I'm glad I didn't do that. We're going to pronounce it as a V, Waenke.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell us, Director of Investing at Footprint Coalition, you are about half a mile from me. I live in Venice. So are you based in LA?
I'm actually based in New York. So we're split between LA and New York. On the investment team side, there's 2 of us here in New York. There's 1 in LA. All of our media and content folks, though, obviously sit in LA.
So natural segue that you give me, your media and content folks. Footprint Coalition was started by Robert Downey Jr. and a partner. Is that correct?
And a couple of partners. So on the investment front, there's really 3 founding partners. There's Robert, and then there's John and Steve, our 2 other co-founding and now managing partners. Maybe a little bit of background, like when Robert started Footprint Coalition, and to this date, we are both a media and investment company. So the whole idea kind of from the get-go was, how do we build a global community of people who care about climate change, who want to get involved, who want to stay informed. And on the investment side, we do that by investing in and partnering with great companies in the climate tech space. But then on the media side, we do this by building a global audience for this stuff. Starting obviously with Robert's following of about 100 million people, but then we engage and cultivate this community through content, ranging from social media to news and publications, all the way to our first TV show that we're producing right now. And so we have all this content and storytelling firepower that we use partly on the media side, but then also to provide a platform for some of these companies that we invest in, exposing them to our audience, producing content with them and for them, and helping them from a storytelling perspective.
Wow, that's wonderful. I hadn't realized to what extent you were working on storytelling. I certainly didn't know that you have a TV show in the works. Do we know when this will air?
We don't know when it'll air just yet. It was just announced like a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be on the electric mobility side. Think Pimp My Ride sustainability style. We're taking a bunch of Robert's old classic cars. We're ripping out the engines. We're electrifying them, putting hybrids in there, putting mycelium leather on the seats. And I've seen a couple of shots, and it's going to be really fun. And it's kind of emblematic of how we think about storytelling. We think anything around climate change and climate tech, and that includes food, quite frankly, has to move away a little bit from the finger pointing, the doomsday scenario, the pitting one side against the other, and supposed to be more fun, more engaging, more relatable for people. And this is a great example. Like, people can get behind cars being faster and better and newer, whichever political side of the aisle you're on, wherever you live. And that's kind of how we think about how the storytelling has to evolve in our space.
I think that's a wonderful tactic. I think of the motorcycle movie where and I'm forgetting, I want to say it's Ethan, but it's not Ethan Hawke. It's Ewan McGregor, goes every 2 or 3 years, goes on a motorcycle trip through Africa or through Central Asia or what have you. And his most recent one he did on an electric motorcycle. So he has this series of movies traveling long distances in motorcycles, and the last one they were dedicated to do, I think, from the southern tip of South America all the way to the top. They are all the way to LA. Actually, they went from Punta Arenas in Chile to Los Angeles on an electric motorbike. And I think this kind of relatable, making all motorcycle people and travel people interested in this kind of content on a personal level, gets beyond this big doomsday headline, as you say. So it's great to see that you're so involved. Is it just in the companies that you invest in, you help with their storytelling, or you go beyond just those companies?
No, I think we see ourselves really as a resource for the entire industry. And whether that's from a news perspective, our chief editor, John Schieber, who used to be the climate tech editor at TechCrunch, now cranks out about 8 to 10 articles on our website every week, kind of serving as a resource for the entire industry and putting a spotlight partly in our portfolio, but there's so much other cool stuff going out there that we like to cast a spotlight on.
Yeah, and so you bring me to your portfolio. You do have quite a few companies. I'll say most focus on climate change, climate tech. So that's not always going to be food. For example, we're at an alternative proteins conference, but that's not always going to be alternative proteins. How do you decide you must get 10 times more pitches than you can actually invest in? How do you decide?
And it's probably more than 10 times than what we can actually invest in. I don't think it's too dissimilar from how any investor in the space will look at it. We love investing behind great teams and great founders. We love investing behind teams that have a differentiated approach, ideally a differentiated technology that's going to set them apart from the market, and then going after an extremely large, in some cases already established market, like in this case within food and within protein. There's just so much work still to be done. There's such a small sliver that where plant proteins are currently being consumed, and therefore a lot of potential for the companies that we invest in.
Yeah, a lot of potential in the market because the alternative proteins market right now is about 1% of the global meat market. So you've got 99% left to take over. So quite a marketing opportunity. But IP, of course, very special there. You're already starting to see in the marketplace, for lack of a better expression, a lot of Me Too kinds of products. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on how things are going to shake out, let's say in the next 3 years. This is not my prediction question for you because that's going to come later. But just in terms of the actual companies out there in the marketplace, do you see a lot of consolidation coming or a lot of drop off?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I think naturally, as in any early stage market, there will be drop off. I think there at some level there will have to be some consolidation. There's only so many more impossible foods and beyond meats that the industry will take. Like one of my favorite questions that I keep asking people, aside from those two, which was the last brand? Like what brand was the last burger that you bought, or the last steak that you bought, or the last cheese that you bought? And in most cases, people have no idea, right? So it's not the world probably doesn't need another 100 different brands, but there's this whole 99% of the market that, for a large extent, is being controlled by the Tysons, the Kraft Heinzes of the world, and then to a large extent, in-house brands by retailers. So as we think about who's going to supply the next the next generation of ingredients, the next generation of products that can live under any kind of brand, I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, so up and down the supply chain, there's a lot of potential for innovation, and then those white label producers who can make for many different companies.
Exactly.
Although I will say, I would agree, we don't need perhaps, let's say, another Beyond Meat or Impossible Foods, although just to shout out to some of the folks, I love Hungry Planet, I love Vegan Us, I love Uncut Burgers. There's just so much. Even JBS, their brand Plantera, is doing some very good chicken. Daring Chicken is great. I mean, there's and I haven't even scratched the surface of all the chickens and burgers that are out there. Of course, I'm not picking favorites. I'm just saying there is more out there. But, go down the chip aisle and you'll be like, how do I choose a bag of chips? Go down the bread aisle, not in the bakery section, but the bread in the plastic sheaths. And you'll be like, wheat bread, wheat white bread, wheat white millet bread, wheat white millet bread, honey. I mean, how do you choose? So I think the consumer loves choice, and you can segment the amount of people who eat a burger. Is that burger and you're older, burger because you're a dude that works out, burger because you're a woman who's trying to be fit, burger because you're a kid and your mom wants you to eat healthy? There's lots of segmentation that could happen.
Yeah, and when, to your point, there's so much beyond the burger, right? We haven't even scratched the surface of what's possible in the whole cuts category, whether it's cold cuts, whether it's bacon, whether it's steaks, whether it's entire chicken. So it's harder, and I think the bar is so much higher from a product quality perspective, but that's the bulk of the market. So that's at some point what we'll have to go after.
Yeah, I really can't wait to see that. So, IP, is that your biggest factor when you choose?
No, not necessarily. I think what we look for is, do we see this company having a sustainable advantage in the market over a long period of time? Because we're in this for the long run, right? We invest in companies and expect them to be in our portfolio for 5 years up to 10 years. And so you can have a sustainable advantage from in many different ways. It doesn't have to be technology or IP. It can be the way you're attacking the market. It can be from a branding perspective, which is something that we can obviously help with. It can be from a scale perspective. So there's a lot of different ways, I think, to carve a niche and differentiate your company which is what we would look for. That's not necessarily just IP driven.
And when you look to invest, do you think about exits? And if so, could you put a time frame on that? 5 to 7 years, 10 to 12 years? And do you care if it's an IPO or an acquisition?
I mean, at the end of the day, we're financially on the investment team, at least we're financially motivated investors. So yes, we have to think about not necessarily just exit for the sake of an exit, but these companies at some point will get to the kind of scale where either it makes sense for them to be a public company and access those capital markets, or be acquired by a much larger company and be part of that company's either IP and technology stack or that company's brand portfolio. So yes, we think about that with every investment that we make. Time horizon differs. So we invest cross stage. We can do and have done anything from a seed round to a late stage growth equity round. And the time horizon that you look at for these investments obviously differs massively. So I would say typically we think of investment horizons of up to 10 years. That's how our funds are structured, with some flexibility towards the end. And with some of the late stage investments that we look at, it's more like a 3 to 5 year horizon.
Yeah. So the later stage, the closer they are going to be towards an exit of some sort. Let's talk a little bit about the health of the market from the standpoint of valuations have been freaky crazy high, but now you're seeing a pullback on investment. First, you saw that pullback in the public markets, which was only a matter of time till you saw it in the private markets. Are you seeing valuations come down? I don't want to say desperation, that's not the right word, but are you seeing that founders are a little bit hungrier for cash, willing to give up a little bit more than they used to? And even a two-part question, even you probably know investors around you at other organizations, are you seeing them pull back? And are you pulling back?
So we're not. We will remain as active as we have been. And I think just as a broad statement of the market, good companies will continue to be able to raise capital. It might not be at the same valuations and they were able to towards the end of last year, or what we saw generally across 2021. You can have many different opinions of whether that's a good or a bad thing. But and I'm seeing this, I think, across the board. There's some investors certainly that have gotten a little bit more careful. Some investors that have gotten very much inward focused on their own portfolio, trying to figure out who of their companies will need cash, will need extra runway, might get into trouble now that it's a tougher fundraising environment. And so for them, as they turn their focus mainly to their portfolio, there's a little bit less work that they'll do from a sourcing perspective, from a new deal perspective. So we'll see that kind of as this new reality kind of shakes out over the next couple of months. But I think as people then figure out what their strategy will be going forward, say the fall, towards the end of the year, I think most of these investors, with some exceptions, will remain active. And then to your point on, have we seen valuations come down in the private markets? I think it's starting. It's early days, right? Most of these companies have to raise capital like every 1, 2, 3 years. And some companies are delaying coming back to the capital markets right now because of all this uncertainty. So I think we'll only see how this shakes out over the next at least 6 months as more and more of these companies come back to the market. I think it's becoming very clear that valuations are going to come down based on some of the stuff that we saw that we just couldn't quite get comfortable with, to be honest, over the last 6 to 12 months. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think the alignment of what you're seeing in funding rounds and what will actually be possible long term in capital markets and in public markets, and even just looking at comparisons of what really, really large companies with billions of revenue currently trade at, I think that's starting to become more and more aligned again, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it also long term takes pressure off of both investors and founders in terms of what they have to deliver and where they have to push things at the company.
Yeah, I actually like to see these adjusted valuations because it, to me, forces more innovation. because if you are not assured of getting funding and you need that special IP, although here he said that it wasn't necessary to have special IP, at least for Footprint Coalition, but a lot of investors want to see that very special differentiation in the market. So it really pushes, it's got to be more than an idea. You've got to have something really IPable, if that's a word. But as we look to, as you say, the bigger players to see what they're doing, their valuations in the public markets also being adjusted. I looked today at the news of Kellogg. Did you hear about it? Let me share it with you. It's very big and exciting. Kellogg, the food company. I'll say that's where I had my first job, folks. You all know, my followers, that I started my career on Special K and Frosted Mini Wheats. Kellogg's announced today that they will break up the company into 3 companies by the end of 2023. It will be their largest portfolio, which is their snack brands, and the international cereal business, Special K, et cetera, will be in the snack business, which I believe is going to be headquartered in Chicago. Their cereal business, domestic, will stay in Battle Creek, and then they'll branch out to a plant-based business. They will be 3 separate public companies, plant-based being its own public company. That's amazing. And I think that says where they think the future's going. Any thoughts about that?
No, absolutely. I think you said it the right way. I think it's interesting because we've seen this up and down with some of these big companies. You saw almost a scramble when Beyond Meat went public with all this with all this success. Every one of them was trying to figure out, oh my God, how do we get into this category? How do we get into this category?
How'd we miss it?
Exactly. Have we missed it? Who do we buy?
What are we doing?
Exactly. And then things started cooling down a little bit, and they got a little bit more I would say cautious. And you talk to some of the guys at these big companies. I don't know when the last time was that they spent billions of dollars on a company that doesn't have applications across their entire portfolio or is in the hundreds of millions of revenue. So some of these acquisitions would have been tough in the first place. I think it's now going to get easier as they think about how do we expand our portfolio. And I think we heard this in one of the earlier sessions today. There is a lot of value that these companies bring, right? Maybe not necessarily from a technology and from an innovation perspective, because they are such large tankers, but in terms of from a supply chain perspective, from a scale perspective, from a cost perspective, which is really where a lot of the work still needs to be done in the plant-based space. This can't be a top 5-10% kind of product category that you only want to afford if you want to overspend. This has to be something that's available for the masses, and that means that prices will have to come down. And for that, we need the kind of capacities that these big companies have. And I mean, the more they can, the more they've put focus, like with this split up or this spin out on this category, and the more it's possible for them to partner with some of the smaller players, the better.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Looking for those distribution channels. And then I always say on this show, I'm looking for their advertising dollars. I'm looking for the ads that say just how manly it is to eat plants. Haven't seen a manly to eat meat commercial in a while, but they used to be there in spades. Arby's, we've got the meats, all this kind of stuff. And now it's going to be, we've got the plants. So I'm really looking for that. Switching gears just a tad bit, tell me about something that I think is really cool, and then we'll have to wrap up and get to the conference ourselves with your predictions. But tell me about the science engine support, what that program is. Yeah. It's not really your field, but it's something very special that you're doing, I think.
It's super exciting, I think. So really, if you look at Footprint Coalition, it's almost like a 3-legged stool. So you have the media aspect of what we do, you have the investment aspect of what we do, and then you have the early science grant giving and nonprofit work that we do. So stuff that is happening really at the earliest stages of science and research programs at universities. It's the kind of stuff that we wouldn't look at from an investment and from a VC fund perspective, right? And so kind of from the get-go, the woman who heads this up for us, her name is Rachel Kropa, built this nonprofit effort where we can get involved with these scientists, can be supportive, not just from a monetary perspective, but also in the same way, kind of putting them on a pedestal and talking about all the cool stuff that they're doing. And then most recently kicked off a program that is called the Science Engine, which is really focused on what's called fast grants. So the ability for some of these for some of these researchers, for some of these science projects, to access extremely fast funding for the ideas that they're working on, not having to go through a lengthy multi-month application process. And so we have a bunch of leaders in specific topic areas that are experts in those areas of research that can give these grants extremely fast, and we can start being supportive to these researchers within weeks, as opposed to being.
So that's so cool, right? Because we need innovation now to solve some of the world's most pressing issues. We've talked about it on the show. We're talking about food insecurity. We're talking about climate change. We're talking about deforestation. We're talking about antibiotic resistance through the overeating of meat, which has all these antibiotics in them. Not to mention food injustice. We talk about that sometimes on this show. Who among us can afford a filet mignon? But if we're getting into cultivated meat, it's filet mignon for everybody. So we look at some of these major issues that are being solved with this kind of critical scientific innovation. And sometimes that grant process can take years, and now you've fast tracked it. I think that's so cool. And have I misunderstood? Can individuals also support these scientists? So in a way that you might think crowdfunding for businesses, this is crowdfunding for science. Help me understand.
Yeah, exactly. So the community aspect is kind of woven through everything that we do on the at Footprint Coalition, whether it's on the media and on the content side and getting an audience engaged and building community that way, whether it's on the investment side. All of our investors are individuals. So we never set this up to be a fund that takes money from pension funds and large institutional investors, but rather we want to build this community of individuals who get excited about the work that we do and want to participate in it, and be able to co-invest with some of the top tier funds in this space, which is what we can enable them to do. And then that same idea applies to the science side. If you want to be supportive, even just with a couple of dollars of some cool science projects that we're supporting in Footprint Coalition, and get involved and learn more, that's something that people can do.
It's so damn cool. Okay, I love that. I wish we had more time together. We don't. It's just like with Gingko Bioworks. I could go, speak to them for days. My wrap-up question for you is, I used to say for 10 years, but now I'm going to say for 3. What are your predictions in the next 3 years?
I think so. I mean, so much is going to happen over the next 3 years. I think there's a number of pockets or areas within the future of food, and specifically alternative proteins, that will develop. I think one aspect that's so far been has lacked a little bit of focus and is coming up more and more is the health aspect of things. Health and price. I think those are the two big factors that weren't really part of the initial, going back to like Impossible and Beyond Meat story, and getting in order to get people excited about new products and have them stick with it. I think you have to give them a little bit more than just the novelty aspect and the climate change aspect, and let people be a little bit selfish, whether it's voting with their wallets or voting with their own health. And you see more and more products now coming into the market that take that into account and are actually not just better for the environment, but better for you. So that's something that I'm really excited about. I think we'll see a number of these technologies, whether it's on the fermentation side, whether it's on the cultivated protein side, get closer and closer to massive scale. It's exciting to see some of these companies now launching to actually put the steel in the ground and be the large scale production facilities. We have planetarians here. We have the BioBrews of the world who've announced efforts like this. I think we'll see some of the first cultivated protein products in the market in the US over the next couple of years coming through regulatory, and we're really excited about that. So there'll be a wealth of new opportunities from a product perspective, and then I'm excited to see what some of these bigger companies will do and how they will help scale some of these early stage efforts and bring them to market.
Oh my God, so much to unpack there and comment on. Briefly, I will. I'll start it from the very end of what you said. I'll work backwards. So I was hiking in Bhutan and ran across, the only other American on the trail was an executive at Cargill. And he said that Cargill was anticipating this shift of the global food supply system. They didn't know exactly when it was going to come, but any project from the inside that requested funding that was around alternative proteins and the shifting the food supply system for the environment and also for people's health, not animals, but for them at least, but for me, but not for them. Okay, for people's health, got immediate funding. So they didn't have to go through their long internal process, was fast-tracked for funding, and they all saw that this shift was going to happen really quickly. And I think that we're living through that now. I think in my lifetime, you will still definitely have meat, but I don't think it will be the majority. On the shorter term, I think you're going to start to see this domino effect happen really quickly, from this large scaling of big players getting in. I think fermentation from an investment standpoint, that's really going to take off where people are investing. And I do think you're going to see more nutritional, healthy plant-based products. But I do want to say, and I'll end here, While the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat aren't a carrot, it's probably pretty obvious, when you went to the store, you picked up a box, you scanned a barcode, you figured out probably, oh, this is not a carrot. They are healthier. They do not induce trimethylene and oxide because they don't have animal products in them. They don't have cholesterol. They have some fiber. They don't have antibiotics. They don't have hormones, and they don't have animal heme. It's a lot already that takes you, because I don't want to disempower the meat eater. We're always talking about the other eater, this person who's thinking about the planet, but I want to give the meat eater power too. They're maybe not thinking about changing the world, but they'd like to take their health one step to the next level. A plant-based burger in its current form, Impossible and Beyond Meat, does that. It is healthier. It is not a carrot, but it is healthier. Can we innovate for more health? Of course we can, and we will, and that's coming down the pipeline.
And that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Like this stuff just keeps getting better. A cow's going to stay a cow. But it's going to get better from a nutritional aspect. It's going to get better from a taste and texture perspective. I mean, the sky's kind of the limit over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
It's so true. It's a really fun time to be alive, to see all this innovation. I lived through the typewriter to the computer. I lived through the landline. We used to have like avocado green landline at home. I lived through the landline to the cell phone, and now I'm living through animal meat to plant-based meat. It is a very exciting time to be alive. Manuel, thank you for being with me. Thank you for sharing your time with me and for all that you do.
Thank you for having me. I've followed your work, seen your videos, so it's great to be right in it.
Oh, I do appreciate that. I will say 2 of my favorite movies are Chaplin and Only You. So Robert Downey Jr., an awesome actor, but really an awesome human being. Of course, there's a huge team. It's not just him. There's a huge team, other co-founders, and obviously we have our investment team and Rachel Krupa, who does great things on the science side. So a huge team over there at Footprint Coalition, but a very cool triangular science, investing, and media Footprint Coalition. Thank you for being with me. We're going to get back to the conference, everybody. I want to thank you all for being with me here on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. I will see you all next Tuesday from Zurich. Yes, I'm back on the road. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.